Apples and pears, dreary dribble, let's throw you in jail for reading the Bible. Twobbly wobbly, happy day, half of our island is.
Say hello to Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I'm told it's a movie-based game, but I never saw the movie, so it doesn't exist. Categorizing Curse of the Were-Rabbit as a platformer isn't quite right. It's the closest genre approximation we have, but it's still inaccurate to some extent. There's running, jumping, and collecting for sure, but I'd call it a chore game, at least for the first hour or two. Check it, you could beat up Wallace. The devil made me do it the first time, the second time I done it on my own, Wallace. As you complete missions laid before you by the townspeople, you earn cards. Yeah, cards. The English tradition of exploiting the working class lives on in the digital realm. Earn enough cards, gain access to the game's different locations. Nothing else to really say about that, it's simple game progression stuff. Finding people who give you things to do yields new tools and map areas that reveal new game mechanics. You're given a screwdriver early on in the game, which reveals a lockpicking minigame that's really good. It has you rotating an arrow with the analog stick to reveal which button presses nudge the lock closer to completion. Not hard at all since you're given ample time to find the combination, but it's a neat way of presenting a familiar task. That no other game I have played copied this way of picking locks is surprising because of how simple and effective it is. Variety is plentiful in Curse of the Were-Rabbit. A lot of neat segments transition the game from one section to the next, like this bouncy ball chase that has you avoiding barbed wire and other spiked things that would puncture it. This is not the only time you will encounter the bouncing device. It doesn't have perfect controls since you cannot perform stationary jumps, but that's the only bad thing that comes to mind. You can also find this rhythm minigame. Your primary task is herding groups of animals into the nearest vortex drains. Herd the creatures before they devour the game's many prize-winning vegetables. Well, that's strange. I thought growing vegetables was illegal in jolly old England. Did you know that it's a form of sexual harassment? Mate, the main herding sections generally take place in self-contained arenas away from the game's open world, and they are very difficult to master. You can pass the missions collecting 1 or 2 cards with a 25 or 50 completion percentage, but achieving 100% in these sections was impossible for me. Herding animals works the way it should most of the time, but you'll always have a wayward rabbit or squirrel that escapes your grasp. Your vacuum gun only holds 1 animal at a time, so you better hope only one goes stray from the herd, or else you're going to be doing a lot of extra running around. Platforming seems like an afterthought for about the first 20% of the game, but it does remind you of its existence more frequently than the player switching mechanic. Wallace has a higher reach, while Gromit is the faster character. You'll find areas throughout the game which utilizes discrepancy. You'll also find areas that require 2 sets of hands. Tell the other character what to do with the press of a button if teamwork is required. Easy. Both platforming and player switching mechanics get more run the further you get into the game. The early portions of Wallace and Gromit are defined by aimless wandering like a lot of open world games of its time. It was during this first quarter or so of the proceedings that I formed a negative opinion about the whole thing. I thought there was no reason for me to wander through the way too big map and that a linear level by level format would have been a much more enjoyable experience. I still prefer linear games as a matter of preference, but areas beyond the initial feel like a collection of small but good levels pieced together to form a larger map. Traversing through these parts of the game lacks the tedium of the starting portions.
Stop touching me, Wallace!
Day and night switches found throughout the world change the game in a few ways. New enemies and missions appear at night while Wallace turns into a bunny. Both characters have a projectile unavailable during the daytime as well. There's just a bunch of aesthetic and practical variety that relieves any monotony that the game may have. Many of the tasks have you defending a number of very large vegetables from garden pests. You're a defender of the veg, but you're also a grower of it as well. You'll find your own large growth in the game's greenhouse feature. You buy upgrades to your greenhouse with coins. I didn't know until several hours into the game that the coinage I was collecting actually served a purpose. I just assumed that this is a platformer, the game needed to have some kind of superfluous collectible. My extended obliviousness to the greenhouse speaks to its level of presence within the gameplay pecking order. Curse of the Were-Rabbit is not a bad game at all, but it's nothing I would call a forgotten classic of the 6th generation. Most of what goes wrong is made right eventually. Curse of the Were-Rabbit gets better in most respects as it draws closer to its conclusion, but I never felt fully engaged. By no means is it a fast-paced affair or even a challenging one. It's kind of like a Sunday drive. It's not memorable, but it's not regrettable.